the lands of Racibórz and Opava, in the past one territorial community, currently divided by the national border, used to be an area of fighting throughout the centuries between nations including the Poles and the Czechs. The Poles and the Czechs today, being two different nations and speaking two different languages, used to be one Slavic tribe 1,000 years ago. After the Celts, the Germanic tribes of Quadi and Vandals, and before the time of Great Moravian people, Czech Przemyslids and Polish Piast dynasty, the area around today's cities of Racibórz, Opava, Głubczyce and Krnów belonged to the tribe of Golencisi, who had already come to this land in the 6th century.
Golężyce nie byli plemieniem ludnym, potencjał demograficzny był mały. Golężyce zamieszkiwali urodzajną Golę.
The tribe of Golencisi was not large, and their demographic potential was small. They inhabited fertile areas called golas, left after being cleared or deforested, and good for growing crops. The golas could feed many people, and that's why the Golencisi settled in the Silesian region, aiming to get food quickly in order to train more warriors, and having more warriors meant they could conquer other lands.
Ekspansywne, bardziej nastawione na zewnątrz.
Mieszkano w chatach drewnianych, podstawą wyżywienia było rolnictwo i hodowla zwierząt.
People used to live in wooden cabins or huts and produce their food from crops and living stock. They also pursued crafts and made weapons, agricultural tools and all other necessary household items from metal and wood. Bones and antlers were also a source of excellent material.
Poroże, z których wykonywano przedmioty codziennego użytku. Panował obrządek ciałopalny, czyli zmarłych palono na stosie.
The dead were cremated and their ashes were collected and put in burial urns. Although there were also graves in which the ashes and pieces of bones were not placed in urns but covered directly with a layer of earth formed into a cone. And sometimes the earth was flat so that the graves was hardly noticeable. We unearthed some graves to discover that some of them contained several buried bodies, and interestingly, apart from the human remains, we found the ashes of animals, which could have been a form of offering. We know quite a lot about the spiritual customs and culture of the Golencisi, as the unearthed evidence proves they were most likely Christians from as early as the beginning of the 9th century.
Odnaleziono resztki ceramiki.
The remains of clay pottery with crosses on their interior surface may suggest that Christ's gospel has reached this region before the year 864 AD, so more than 100 years before the acceptance of Christianity by Mieszko I.
A więc ponad 100 lat przed przyjęciem chrześcijaństwa przez Mieszka I.
The first reference to the Golencisi tribe comes from about 845 AD and could be found in the work of the Bavarian geographer. However, it is so laconic and vague that it causes scientists and historians to make various conjectures.
Wiemy tylko tyle z geografa bawarskiego, czyli źródła spisanego około 845 roku.
We only derive from the Bavarian geographer that the tribe of Golencisi lived here on the upper Odra river and maybe on the upper Wisła river as well, and that they had 5 castle towns, and it was a small tribe compared to, for example, the tribe of the Opolans. Nevertheless, neither historians nor archaeologists are sure of the location of these castle towns. The borders under the control of the Golencisi were designated in different ways. It is almost certain that one of the 5 castle towns was Hradec nad Morawicy and the other Lubomia. Could one also have been Racibórz? The opinions are inconsistent.
Tym grodem golężyckim na pewno nie był Racibórz, dlatego że
Racibórz could not have been one of these Golencisi castle towns, as the evidence discovered in the area of Racibórz castle comes from the 11th century. A Golencisi castle town situated in this part of Silesia was the one in Lubomia. Only the fall of Lubomia as a result of the attacks of the great Moravian armies of Prince Światopolk I in about 865-866 led to the liquidation of Lubomia and then great opportunities opened for Racibórz as the most important castle town in this part of Silesia. What is known is that the castle town Hradec really existed. In medieval sources it was called Golencisi Hradec. We have such records dated 1069 and 1155, which says that Golencisi Hradec was on the south border of the old Poland and the old country of Bohemian Przemyślic dynasty. As for Racibórz, this is just a research hypothesis related to the fact that the source from the 9th century was not accurate enough. So if Racibórz belonged to the system of the Golencisi castle towns, it must have been a small one, since many researchers and archaeologists imply that except from these 5 large castle towns there were also many smaller, orbit habitats. Racibórz may have been one of them. This fact may be proved by the existence of grave mounds in the Obora forest.
Moim zdaniem na pewno istniała jakaś osada.
In my opinion, there must have been a settlement in the 7th or 8th century nearby, so that there were not trouble transporting the dead or care for the graves. I think the distance between Lubomia and Obora forest is too big for it to be a burial place for the residents of this area. That is why I guess that somewhere near Markowice or Brzezie should be some remains of an early medieval settlement. It also results from the way the area was exploited. People had to grow crops, breed animals. So these not offensive settlements had to be opened and dispersed at some distance from one another. However, the fortified castle town fulfilled the defensive function, and the inhabitants could gather there with their belongings and stock. When and where exactly the tribe of Golencisi had lived, archaeological research carried out with the use of modern methods may help to answer these questions, as the previous studies conducted almost half a century ago were not precise enough. Unfortunately, there are only few written sources referring to the Golencisi.
Wiemy, że na pewno mieszkali w tej części Górnego Śląska. Od nazw Gola często stosowanych.
We definitely know that they used to live in this part of Upper Silesia. We derive this fact from the names of Gola, found in documents of the Czech royal office as well as the ducal office in Racibórz. And this Gola is mentioned in the document of Nicholas II, the Raciborz duke from the dynasty of Przemyślic, while the document of Raciborz Wenceslaus refers to Gola situated near Racibórz and Opawa. What exactly was the history of our ancestors like? The beginning of the end, and consequently a starting point in a career of Racibórz, was a destruction and defeat of the castle town in Lubomia in the mid-9th century by the armies of Polish Duke Swatopolk. A terminal date is the year 1108, when according to Gallus' anonymous records, the army of King Bolesław the Rymouth conquered Racibórz castle and consequently took the northern part of the Golencisi territory. The land of the Golencisi was divided in 2 halves. The southern part, with today's Hradec, became the part of the Czech-Moravian Przemyślic country, while the northern part, with Racibórz, belonged to Polish Piast dynasty.
Ta sytuacja spowodowała dalekosiężne skutki.
This situation triggered far-reaching results. First of all, it influenced the shape of later borders of church dioceses, which exercised their impact through the language. Thus, within the Wrocław diocese, the Polish language were spoken, and within the diocese of Olomouc, the Czech language prevailed. There were also consequences for the local community, as the people divided by the border gradually forgot that they had descended from one nation. That is why Racibórz and Opawa inhabitants are hardly aware now of their common ancestors. In order to look for the traces of this Slavic tribe, we should start our journey in Lubomia, a local castle town of the Golencisi, with a several meter-high double embankment of the old castle town still standing. There are also grave mounds in the Obora forest in Racibórz. Apart from tangible evidence, the names of some local places such as Holasowice or Goleszowice suggest the existence of this tribe. Hradec and Racibórz, 2 Golencisi territories, are also joined with a legend of a meeting of the procession of Polish Duke Mieszko with the Czech princess Dobrawa and her wedding procession on her way to this Piast Duke.
No i tej tradycji byłby jakiś sens, no bo...
There is a meaning to this legend, because if you look at the lay of the land, it could be noticed that Hradec closes the southern flanks of Silesia, and the castle in Racibórz delimits the northern area, which used to be controlled by the Golencisi. Moreover, Hradec is in a way a symbol of these Polish-Czech contacts, because that legendary meeting took place yet before the baptism of Poland, and for about 100 years the Poles and the Czechs fought there. We may say that what we owe to the Golencisi is the place we live in. The castles, which stand in the places of the former Slavic castle towns, a heritage of this tribe, built by the Golensisi descendants, the castle in Hradec nad Morawicy and the Piast castle in Racibórz. In the 12th century, the castle in Racibórz was a seat of the Polish castellan, and in the second half of the 12th century, the seat of the Opole-Racibórz Duke Mieszko I, the Spindle-leg, who united the Polish land along the upper Odra river. Whereas Hradec had been captured in the 11th century by the Czechs, at first it belonged to the Olomouc Principality, then it was a capital of the Opava Principality till 1400. In the mid-13th century, King Przemysl Ottokar II built a Gothic castle in the place of the former construction of wood and earth. It was a stronghold with powerful fortifications difficult to conquer, whereas Racibórz castle town was reconstructed at the beginning of the 13th century, at the reign of Prince Kazimierz, who, although spent most of his time in Opole, appreciated the importance of Racibórz in this defensive system of the south border. The construction of this Gothic castle was finished at the late 13th or early 14th century. Both castles were rebuilt many times, and history was not equally kind for them, hence their different fate and their modern looks. The castle in Hradec is one of the three biggest castle complexes in the Czech Republic. It consists of two parts. The older part, the White Castle, which was the witness of history, offers its visitors several dozen of beautiful chambers. Among the famous guests of the White Castle were Amadeus Mozart, Francis Liszt, Paganini and Ludwig van Beethoven. To commemorate the state of this great composer, since 1961, the castle has been a venue of the international music contest called Beethoven's Hradec. The second part of the complex and the gate is called the Red Castle, imitating a Gothic building built in the 19th century for the service workers. Now a hotel, a restaurant and a concert hall. A walk in a beautiful vast English-style park with a white tower is also a must, while in Hradec nad Morawicy. The visitors are welcomed all year round, and they may choose two sightseeing routes, the main and the extensive one, with a visit to a castle gallery, small and large, other galleries and the ritual hall. There are over 11,000 objects and 20,000 antique books. The main sightseeing route leads through the cigar saloon, the Rand Chamber, the large and small guest saloons, the Prince's bedroom, Hubert's playroom and the rest of the chambers. There are 2 or 3 additional exhibitions a year. The White Castle can be visited in one day, but we also propose accommodation in the Castle Hotel and meals in its restaurant. Major reconstruction of the White Castle was completed in 2014, and since then the whole building has been open to the public. There are 50,000 visitors a year, and thanks to numerous concerts, plays, fencing tournaments, culinary events and exhibitions, this number increases to 200,000. Leaving Hradec, we invite you to Racibórz and to the Piast Castle, where Duchess Euphrosyne, the mother of the Polish King Władysław the Elbow High, used to live. It was also the place from where the grandson of King Bolesław the Wrymouth, Prince Mieszko the Spindleshanks, set to Krakow to get the throne. In some point of history, the Teutonic Knights tried to seize this castle through forgery. Later on, this historical building belonged to Jerzy Hohenzollern, the brother of the last Grand Master of the Teutonic Order in Prussia, and then to Queen Isabella Jagiellon and the Polish dynasty of Wasa. One of the stories says that there was dinner after which King John III Sobieski was defeated in a card game by the Ugliest Lady, and the other that there is a secret passage starting at the basement of the old tower and leading under the Odra River. Apart from the castle, tourists can visit the 13th century castle chapel of St. Thomas Becket, called the Silesian Saint Chapel, and the oldest Upper Silesia brewery. The castle recovered its glamour in 2012 after several year reconstruction partially donated by the European Union. Today the courtyard is full of life, especially in spring and summer, due to various periodic events such as floral fairs, ghost nights, history sessions, the science festival and a reconstruction of the procession of King John III Sobieski's armies. The chapel and the castle are open all year round.
Serdecznie zapraszamy na różnego rodzaju wystawy.
We kindly invite you to various permanent and temporary displays. There is a chamber devoted to the history of Silesian prison service, the chamber of the border guards and the police, the so-called Silesian Sherwood, where children can learn about animals which lived in this area. There are also paintings exhibitions which arrive from all over the world. They are children's and young artists' works and the ones already known in the world. Our castle has also a tourist information office which is open from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and its workers are happy to introduce the history of the castle and to show the groups or individual tourists around.